of the Budget and Finance Commission. I'd like to call the meeting to order. And Laura, if we could have a roll call vote of attendees, please.
Okay, Commissioner Allen?
Here.
Commissioner Justy?
Here.
Commissioner Woodham?
Here.
Commissioner Samples?
Here.
Commissioner Sherbin?
Here.
Chair Castle?
Here.
Thank you.
And I believe we're just missing one.
We have 2 blue folders?
No, Marin is not here tonight.
Oh, yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Commissioner Marin, not present.
Yes.
Sorry.
That's okay. If you would please stand and we will salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is to approve the order of agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next are the blue folder items. We did receive 2 items. Could you tell us what those are?
Yes, we have 2 blue folder items. J2, City Treasurer's Q4 Fiscal Year 2023-2024 Report. It's a revised presentation relating to the Budget and Finance Commission Economic and Market Update. And the other one is J3, Fiscal Year 2023-Q4 Financial Reporting. It's also a revised presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is the consent calendar, and this is for the approval of the affidavit of posting for the regular meeting tonight of the Finance Commission on August 8th. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No opposed. Are there any excluded consent calendar items tonight? There are none. Do we have public participation on any non-agenda items tonight?
There are no e-comments and no attendings at this time.
Okay, thank you. There are no items continued from previous agendas, which brings us to item J, the items for discussion prior to action tonight. First on the agenda is consideration of salary adjustment for the elected city attorney position in advance of the March 2025 election. Tonight we will have Diane Strickfaden, our Director of Human Resources, give us a presentation. Thank you. Diane?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Chair, members of the Commission. I'm Diane Strickfaden, Human Resources Director. Before you this evening is a report outlining the process to consider salary adjustments for elected officials, specifically in this case for the city attorney position, which is becoming vacant in April 1st, 2025. In 2005, City Council established a policy for the review of future salary adjustments for elected officials by requesting a recommendation from the Budget and Finance Commission. The charter provides that if a salary is adjusted, that change must be completed 30 days prior to the nomination period for the next election through adoption of an ordinance by the City Council. It then becomes effective at the beginning of the forthcoming term on April 1st. So the nomination period for the March 2025 election opens on November 12th, 2024. Therefore, any salary changes need to be adopted by council 30 days prior or concluded by the council meeting on October 15th. As changes are adopted by ordinance, which requires both a first and second reading at City Council, a recommendation, if any, is to be made, needs to be made this evening in order to meet the City Council's deadlines. The review for city attorney is typically conducted every 4 years before a new term of office. And as mentioned in the report, the city attorney's salary was last updated in 2016 with an ordinance being adopted, giving the position increases from the years 2018 through 2020. The review conducted in 2020 resulted in no additional increases from 2021 through 2024. So there's been no change to the salary since 2020. Provided within the report is background information, including a brief salary survey for the position. The cities that were selected for that survey have a comparable scope as they both oversee city attorney civil matters as well as prosecution matters. Although Redondo is the only elected position, the other 4 cities are appointed city attorneys. So if the commission decides to make any recommended adjustments to the salary this evening, an ordinance will be presented to the city council in September. So with that, I'd like to open it up for the commission's discussion and analysis or questions.
Do we have questions?
Yeah, a question. Generally speaking, do you use an index like the Consumer Price Index to make a determination about what increases need to be? Or what's the process that historically has taken place in order to make this type of evaluation?
So for the past 2 or 3 times, we've done these salary surveys as presented in the report. And usually, you're right, that's what ends up happening is people make a recommendation for CPI increase every 4 years. They don't say CPI in the ordinance, it'll say 2%, 3%, or whatever. And a lot of times, they have tried to mirror what happened with city staff, specifically the management confidential unit, because the elected department heads, they are department heads, and they get all the benefits from the management confidential unit, like health insurance and retirement and that kind of stuff. So typically, and I think I mentioned it in here, like the management confidential unit received a total of 8% in cost of living adjustments since 2020. So they got 1% in 2022, 2% in 2023, and 5% in 2024. So, I mean, that could be a basis if the commission wanted to look at that, or you could pick CPI for the past 4 years. A lot of it is some estimating also, because we don't know what's going to happen. But that's basically the history of how it's been done.
And just another quick question related to the cities that have been selected to get an indication about what a median, or pardon me, a mean salary would be. Is there any scientific background of selecting that group of cities?
Well, those are cities.
Geographically close, might be one observation, but is that really a good way to make this determination?
Yeah, I mean, typically we survey cities that are in the same market that we are. Culver City, Inglewood, Torrance are in our survey cities that we've adopted for city staff. Santa Monica was included because we wanted to have another city in there that was sort of comparable, that also does civil matters as well as prosecution matters. When we get into the larger cities that have city attorneys, we're talking Los Angeles, Long Beach, I mean, they're really big and they've got a huge staff, so they're not really as comparable. So we tried to stick to cities in LA County that are similarly structured to us.
Yeah, just one other quick one. It says that our attorney is responsible for both civil and criminal types of prosecution, and that's a rare, apparently, or not a common kind of comparison. I guess my question is, why is our, if you know why our attorney is structured that way, that office is structured that way, and if the other cities, city attorneys don't have that responsibility, how is that accomplished? Is the county handling the prosecution, or?
My understanding, and I'm not an attorney, so I will say that, is the county handles felonies, but the district attorney handles felonies. We handle misdemeanors and infractions here locally in Redondo Beach. I think it's in our charter. It's the way we're structured. I know Torrance is the same way. I did a quick search, and Inglewood and Culver City and Santa Monica also have their own prosecution, but I don't think they do felonies either. I think those go to LA County.
Has the caseload changed much in the last 4 or 5 years?
That, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I do oversee risk management, and claims actually were reduced in 2020, 2021, but then there was an uptick when people returned to work and returned to their general lives. We did see an uptick, but there has been overall reduced claim activity from before 2020 to now,
Reduced claim in terms
like
of
claims against the city,
number of claims or dollar value of claims?
number of claims filed.
Okay, what about dollar value?
I'd have to run a report on that. I don't know the answer.
Do you have any comparison? Right now, we've got a salary comparison. Do you have any other comparisons that we can use to think about this? Span of control, department budget, success rates? There's got to be some metric that city attorneys use to measure their own performance. What else do you have besides just salary comparisons?
Well, the cities that we are picking to survey are similar in size and scope as far as number of staff and that kind of thing, and budget. Some of Santa Monica's a little bit larger, but basically they're considered similar compared to cities that, have elected city attorneys and oversee, district attorney offices and that kind of thing. As far as performance measures, I mean, we could get those from the city attorney's office.
Well, I understand that the cities are comparable in size, but you're telling me that the city attorney's office in each of these cities is fairly comparable to ours in terms of number of personnel, overall budget, caseload? I mean,
I think we have fewer in-house staff than they do, but I don't know about their consultants. And
so basically, we don't have any way to compare any of this. We're just shooting at salaries.
I might add something, a little suggestion that I did just on my own. I took the salaries that are indicated for the other city attorneys, and I divided it by the population in the city to come up with a cost per resident for the position. And just real quickly, just to kind of give you an idea of the range that is, Torrance pays $255,000. They've got a population of 136,000, so the dollars per resident head count is $1.87. Redondo, 274,000, 66,500 gives us a cost per head count of $4.12. So you can see that there's quite a bit of variation, even though the salaries themselves are not that different. Inglewood, that same statistic comes out to $2.78. And Culver City, with $315,000 in salary and 40,000 in population, comes out to $7.87 per head count. Quite a big variation. Santa Monica, 380,000 in salary and 88,900. Population is 4.27 per head count. And then I threw in Long Beach on my own here. It's 368,000 in salary. Population is 465,000, and that's 0.79 per head count. So I don't know the validity of using some type of a matrix like that, but as I say, that's kind of another interesting way, not given the fact that we have any performance metrics that we could actually use, as far as I know, other than some that Mel suggested, a couple that would be interesting.
Can I ask a couple of quick questions? Which of these cities are elected versus?
Just Redondo Beach.
Just, okay.
And-
Because my understanding, and this is probably, I don't know and I need further education, but elected officials usually do make less because it's partly volunteer position. So that's been my understanding. So I would not compare elected official salary to a staff salary.
And they have more autonomy.
Yes, and so my other question would be, is this a full-time job, and really how much does this person work? And what do they do in-house versus what do they outsource? So, because when someone is elected, you can't really hold them accountable, and they do whatever they want. So and I don't know, I'm not saying that's what he does, but if they want to outsource everything and not work, they can do that, and you cannot hold them accountable.
Well, we can hold them accountable by controlling the salary that they get paid, can't we?
So that's why I was asking if you would know, is he a part-time staff or is he full-time staff?
He's considered full-time. He's considered a department head, just like the elected city clerk. A full-time employee department head, oversees the budget, a staff, and the elected city treasurer is also a full-time department head. The one thing you should probably make note of is that another reason these cities were selected, if you go throughout the South Bay and you look at Hermosa Beach, Manhattan Beach, all the other, Lawndale, Rancho Palos Verdes, they're all a lot smaller budgets. They all have contract city attorneys. In fact, most of them use the same firm, the same guy. He goes, so because they're smaller and he works part-time on a contract for them. So they're not charter cities, they're general law cities, so they're structured differently, and that's why they're able to do that. And we have a city charter that lays this out, and that's part of the reason that we're being compared to other charter cities.
Got it.
Just so you know.
Okay, thank
But
you.
we have no visibility into what our city attorney outsources, partly because he's an elected official. The city council may know, the city manager may know, but it's not something that's published. It's not something that's transparent, and we don't know whether his budget is going up or down or how well he's managing it. So we don't really have a good way to evaluate that either. I'm kind of sad that this is all the material that we have to make a decision that it sounds like you're asking for something on the order of an 8% raise. And I kind of have some fundamental difficulty with that.
I think it goes back to the workload. How much workload do they have? And if there is some way you can determine, the success rate or whatever, then that might be one way to do the performance review. This is how it is done in the private sector.
And I'm hesitant with elected official making as much as staff.
Do you have any data for other compensation? I've seen some of the studies that have been done in the past, and the other compensation ends up being a fairly substantial figure, large enough that we need to know that before we make any decisions on this package. I agree with one of the previous comments. Since I've lived in Redondo Beach, I've heard that this position is one of the highest paid elected positions in the state. The data that we see here doesn't really support that because some of these other salaries are higher. So I'm a little bit mystified as to how that comment ever came to be based on this, but I do know that the other compensation figure affects it as well. So if we're asked to vote tonight or give an opinion on a certain percentage increase,
We don't have data.
I'm totally at a loss because I don't feel any ability to make that intelligent decision.
Do we have any data how much other elected attorneys make?
There's data available online. They aren't comparable cities, so we didn't select them. However, most of the elected city attorneys, they're for gigantic cities like San Francisco, Oakland, Los Angeles, San Diego, I believe Long Beach. They make more.
What was Long Beach? You had that information.
Pardon me, the salary in Long Beach, I believe, is $368,000. I don't know
And that's
exactly
elected.
if that's this year or last year, but that's,
But that's an elected position making 360 in Long Beach versus Redondo.
And Commissioner Woodham brings up a really good point. As a city employee, it's their compensation and all of their benefits are very well defined and published and well known. How does our elected officials' compensation package, total compensation package, compare to that?
The elected department heads receive the same benefits that the city regular staff department heads receive in the management and confidential pay plan, which is published on our website. So they get this salary as their base salary, and then they're eligible for the health insurance contributions and the retirement contributions of 7% and everything else.
But what about other eligible expense categories, other benefits? I don't know, use of the city car? What other benefits do they have? Or is
There's
it
a
not?
$375 car allowance per
Okay.
month and a $55 cell phone allowance.
Okay.
Is that for all department heads or just this?
That's for all department heads.
Okay.
How many people do you have in the, under the city attorney working for him?
Gosh, there's like 3 or 4 prosecutors, I believe, and some paralegals under them on the prosecution side. And I think there's, what, 7? Civil attorneys?
In Redondo? The staff is 13, I think. I just looked at that. Is that what your question was?
I think your number came close to
Yeah.
that number.
It's 13, but that includes both,
Prosecution
yeah.
and civil.
correct.
In terms of the increases that the other cities have in their packages that they vote on, are they set like ours where it's, 1%, or is it tied more like to CPI? Or do you have any?
Yeah, I don't have the data on what other cities are doing, but a lot of them, like Torrance just gave their city attorney an increase, and he got what all the management staff got. I think it was 3%.
Okay.
I just happen to know that because I live nearby. But yeah, as far as Culver City, I believe their increases are tied to an ordinance in the city where they compare it to some, like the county and Los Angeles and something else, and they do some math to come up with their increases. So they have a city ordinance that describes it. But yeah, as far as Santa Monica and Redondo, and well, I know how Redondo, but it's Inglewood. I can't answer that, but I do know that our numbers have gone down. He used to be much higher up in this survey,
Right.
but now he's,
Does our charter define any requirements? Who can be city attorney, or do they need any type of a degree? It requires, I'm assuming, it requires a law degree.
you have to be a licensed attorney, and
Okay,
you have to be a
okay,
resident of Redondo Beach.
Are they required to work full-time, or can they have their own business on the side?
That's a good question. I believe they're required to work full-time, dedicated to the city, just like regular city employees are.
But I don't think there are laws prohibiting them having their own practice.
We have a
On
former
the
city
side.
treasurer that owned a business the entire time that he was on the city council and was treasurer.
Yeah, I'm not an attorney. I can't answer the question about whether it's legal or not.
Seems we have a lot of questions.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions and not a lot of answers.
Have you, these are all South Bay comparisons. Have you expanded that to increase the sample size, to go further south, San Diego, that area, up around San Francisco, to see if you get the same sort of spread as you have here?
We don't usually use the Bay Area because the cost of living is about 40% higher, and the salaries in every public agency are 40% higher.
Again, I'm mystified at the fact that we show this salary in the middle here, and I don't really have a good recall of the data I've seen before, which shows this position being much higher relative to the competition in this. Because I don't remember that data, I didn't have a good grasp on it. I'm at a loss to bring any intelligence to this conversation, because I just don't have enough information to say. On the one hand, we have a long-term employee who's retiring, so there's not an issue of reducing a person's salary, but if we had any information indicating that the position is more highly compensated than it should be, now's the time to make that adjustment. Because the new person coming in knows exactly what they're getting, and so again, I don't know what motion we're really expected to act on tonight, or what action we're expected to take. But I'm personally not in any position to vote on an increase or a decrease, because I don't know what the competition is like. I don't know what the economics of those other cities are, and whether we're comparing apples to apples or apples to oranges. And I don't want to simply kick the can down the road and say, it's always been done this way, so let's give it a nominal increase and let it go. I don't think that's the right thing to do. But I don't know what the right thing to do is, because we don't have enough information.
Well, following on your comment, if the qualifications for this job are, they don't have to go through a job interview, they don't have to be approved by the city manager, they don't have to be vetted by the city council, All they have to do is be an attorney and live in Redondo Beach. That means we could have anyone as our next city attorney as long as they pass the bar exam.
And are elected.
Yep, and elected. They won the popularity contest.
Right. Won the popularity contest.
Yep.
I don't know that we should even be considering competitive salaries if that's the case, because we could end up with anybody.
Yep. And yes, and I do not want to compare them to staff salary.
No.
Staff where you can hold them accountable, you can fire them, you can discipline them. And elected officials, they,
But on the same token, on the opposite side of the same coin is you need a sort of comparable salary to what high-quality attorneys make in Los Angeles so that we can attract people to run for a race. Because if the salary that we're offering is 50% of market for someone with the qualifications that voters would want, they wouldn't run for the job.
that's a great point. Has there been, and I should know this, but I don't, have there been instances where there weren't enough people running for this office?
I don't have the
I don't
answer.
know if anyone would know.
There was one competitor in the last election in around 2020. He didn't win. Before that, I don't know that there was a competitor.
I guess that's a very good point that you bring up. What happens if no one runs for attorney? What does our charter say? Then what happens?
Somebody will run.
But what will happen if no one runs?
Contracted.
I don't know, I mean, I know you're not an expert in our charter, but,
If-
see, this,
if no
it
one
would have been
runs, it's a-
helpful if there was an attorney answering these questions, because we do have a lot of, I think, good questions.
You said what would
This-
happen if no one runs?
Yes.
If
And we
no
have
one
no
runs, the
attorney, or is
position's
it
empty.
appointed? Will Mike appoint someone?
City manager.
Or-
I would kind of guess that, and this is probably an HR question, I would kind of guess that with a vacant position, whoever the deputy district attorney is, who is a hiree of the city, would then be, in essence, promoted to that position. Is that correct?
That can be done. The city council could make that decision.
So the reason I
Appoint
asked
somebody.
this question is, should there be concern that, oh, no one is running for this position? So that's why I'm bringing this up, because that's a good point.
Right, I mean, I think at an extreme, if your salary is so low that it's totally out of bounds with the market, you're not going to attract, because no
Yeah,
one's
right.
going to cut their salary from 300 to 50 just to say that I'm a city attorney and have it be a full-time job.
But also, I'm looking at our council members who run for office, and they work
But that- I mean, it's-
full-time,
But it's,
and they get paid pennies.
right.
So it's really to be an elected official is not, should not be about money. It should be about the service you want to give to your community.
But at the same time, our city
So I
attorneys
don't
have to
want,
work
that's
full-time
why I
jobs.
don't want the money to be a motivator for someone to run for this office.
Once again,
That's fine.
our former treasurer ran on the idea that he was going to cut the salary of the city treasurer, and he did by, if I recall, it was something like 70 or 80%. And that's currently the salary scale for our current treasurers. Is that correct, sir? Okay, so we have a treasurer that ran based on a salary that's
Right.
70% less than the last city treasurer, and somehow we got a city treasurer. I don't know that dollars is the attractant.
I'll just add a point from the city charter that responds to one of your questions earlier, which is that the requirement is they have to practice an attorney and have been engaged in active practice in the state of California for 5 years. It says they shall devote their full-time duties and shall not engage in any private legal practice during the term of office.
Right, so that means that to have a competitive salary, we'd have to have a salary at least comparable to a fifth-year attorney out of law school in Los Angeles.
And I would just make a note for the comparison to city council members. I agree, that's a full-time job. I think a city attorney could be somewhat different in that you do need the qualifications to practice as an attorney. And I think it's very important to the city that we have someone very qualified to practice in that role.
But the point I wanted to make was that when you run for an office, you don't run for money. That's not your motivator. You run for public service. That's your motivator, to give back to the community.
And to your point, has to have 5 years' experience practicing law and can't engage in continuing the practice of law once they're elected. Doesn't say they can't engage in any other business.
It does say that's true. It does say they shall devote their full time to the duties of the office.
That they're elected, so they get to determine what their full-time is. There's nobody that can tell them that it's 40 hours a week or 36 hours a week or 80 hours a week.
Good evening. Thank you. If I may, my name is Eugene Solomon. The Assistant Finance Director raised a point of clarification that I was going to go ahead and provide to you all. And that is my understanding that the person could not work based on the charter definition in another job. Granted, Commissioner Samples, it would depend on what that person decided to devote to that job. Would they be considered full-time? To answer some of your other questions, in the 2021 discussion, it would have been in September, around September of 2020. We had this discussion at the Budget and Finance Commission. One of our colleagues on the commission at that time put together a spreadsheet answering what Commissioner Sherbin mentioned with a number of other cities, populations, salaries, base salary plus benefits. So may want to go back and find some of that. When it comes to the person who's going to run or not run, the current city attorney had a contestant in the last election, did not have a contestant in the 2 elections before that, but had several contestants in the elections before that. He's been the city attorney for some time. There is one person who's already filed or is announced, I should say, that they are going to run for city attorney in our upcoming election. To Commissioner Sherbin's point, yes, we do have our budget for the city attorney's office. In the past, it's been around $4 or $5 million, and the budget is published online, and you can find that. What is not published online is our outside counsel expenses, who we hire out for some specialty work, which in the past has been as high as, say, $3 million, in addition to the work that's being done under the budget of the city attorney's office. So yes, there are a lot of moving parts to this that I think answer many of the questions that you had raised, other than what the Assistant Finance Director had raised. Thank
A
you.
lot of moving parts to this.
A question, could we, directed to Mr. Strickfaden, could we have someone with expertise in analyzing what a salary requirement would be for this position? I mean, could that be a consulting project? Because I'm thinking with the variability and the number of dollars involved here, it would seem that we ought to be able to afford hiring someone in on a short project basis, just to give us a basis for comparison.
Unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of time. We need to make a decision tonight so that the city council can do their job. So this is coming to us in the 11th hour, and I have to agree with Commissioner Woodham. I don't have enough information here to make a decision one way or the other.
I would like to ask staff, and I know this is, I know, I understand that, we're always running late and giving information to the last minute, but anything like this, maybe be mindful that we might have questions and we might need you to go and do more research, so we can't make decision in the last minute.
And the commission could make a recommendation to make no change also.
Yeah, and that's probably what's gonna end up.
And the recommendation that you're asking for tonight would be for the full term of or could we do 1 year?
It would be for the full term.
Okay.
But again, I mean, the resolution that the city council adopted this process back in 2005, so, it says, they want the Budget and Finance Commission to review it, but that doesn't mean you have to review it and raise the salary or lower it. You could take no action. You could, or a combo.
And they can do anything they want. So this is just a recommendation.
Correct.
We might be agonizing over this far too much.
Okay. So, because the final decision is with the council, they're just being polite to bring it to us first.
Is it going to be on the ballot this year?
This recommendation, it'll be on a
this
city council
position?
agenda.
Yes, it will be
Election.
in March.
In March 2025, there will be.
Okay,
an
so we
election.
still have some time to,
No, we don't, because
Well, so the city council has to hear this, like the first meeting of September, because if they choose to make changes or not, then we have to bring an ordinance back, and that has to have a first reading and a second reading, and they take place at separate meetings. And the whole process has to be wrapped up 30 days before the nomination period in early November. So the council might have to go over this item 3 times.
So anyone wants to make a motion?
So these figures that you gave us are salary only, don't include any benefits, right?
That's correct, but the other cities are also tied, their benefits are also tied to their department heads in the same way.
Do you know what the department head increase was for this year? So in this, it's sort of recommending or implying an 8% increase over the current salary? Do you know?
Yeah, the department heads got 5% in January 2024.
Okay. I mean, we could just vote to keep it in line with that or do the 8%.
Or just make no recommendation, unable to make a recommendation, I think. My thought is if we can't contribute something that'll help them make a decision, it doesn't make a lot of sense from my point of view to make a suggestion.
Right.
And that's kind of what the place that I'm at.
If we make no recommendation at all, then we have no voice going to the council, and our reasoning and our discussion basically is for naught.
We
So we
don't have
almost-
enough information to say yes to the increase, therefore we're saying no.
Or we're not saying no, we're making no recommendation.
Well, if we're,
I don't know how, I don't know, saying no recommendation, it just,
I would be in favor of some sort of communication to city council indicating why there's not a recommendation. You can't make a recommendation or vote on a recommendation if you don't have enough information to make an intelligent decision.
right.
And it's the height of stupidity, I think, to vote on something that we don't have a clue, not much of a clue, about how relative it is to the industry, to the market. I appreciate the 5 cities that we see here, or 6 with Long Beach added, but I don't know whether that, and I'd like to see the something from somewhere else in the state, but I just, again, I don't have enough information. I cannot vote on this either yes or no. I would have to abstain if we voted on this now because
Yeah, I don't know if, I don't think we can abstain legally from voting.
this might be the first time, but
But I've read
I'm pretty
somewhere
sure I
that
will.
we have to vote on something,
Watch.
so.
we're going to
let's,
have to vote on something,
let's-
even if
let's-
it's nothing more than
let's
send a letter to the city council.
verbalize something to vote on.
We're going to have to vote on something, even if it's just to send a letter to the city council that explains what we thought, what we did, and why we're making a non-recommendation.
Right, so basically it would be to receive and file, and then we would attach a letter explaining that we couldn't make a recommendation for or against because we don't have the,
Because once we receive and file it, the discussion's over. So we have to make a decision that we're going to either make a recommendation, or we're going to send a letter to the city council explaining what we thought or what we're thinking. And we have, at this point, we have no recommendation for salary increase or decrease. That would kind of be where we would be at. Because once we receive and file it, it's closed.
So motion to,
Table.
well, sorry, I'm not clear. Can we receive and file it with no recommendation is my,
Well, we can, but that just means that the city council is going to say, where's the recommendation from Budget and Finance? And staff has to tell them,
there
Budget
wasn't.
and Finance didn't act, they just filed it.
Or you could make a recommendation to not raise the salary. That could be a recommendation.
that's
No
what I would do.
changes.
Yeah. Well, so the assumption is that the salary needs to be raised. And the question is, because if we go through our overall conversation, should it be decreased? So our real recommendation is neither increase it nor decrease it, and this is why. That would, and it would be send a formal communication, staff to prepare a formal communication to be signed by the chair and sent to the city council so that they can hear what our recommendation is. And our recommendation is, we don't have enough information, we don't have any way to intelligently assess what this situation is. Therefore, we can't make a recommendation to increase or decrease the salary and benefits.
In other words, maintain status quo.
Well, that would be our recommendation. Whatever the city council does is up to them. They can look at it and say, well,
We disagree and.
yeah,
So I make a motion to not adjust the salary for elected city attorney position due to lack of information. You want to
Say
revise
again.
that?
Say that again. What's the motion?
Motion to not adjust the salary for elected city attorney due to committee not having enough information.
I second.
I think the motion needs to be more along the lines of,
Okay, go ahead.
your general verbiage, I think, is pretty okay, but it needs to be that the Budget and Finance Commission needs to, or staff needs to prepare a letter to be signed by the chair and forwarded to the city council with that recommendation. Does that make sense?
Right, saying that we didn't have enough information
We just- yeah.
to adjust the salary.
Staff has to do what?
Well, normally when we send a letter to the city council, staff prepares the letter, or they prepare a draft of it normally.
Oh, I didn't know
And
we'd
what
send a
as-
letter to the, I didn't know we'd send a letter.
Well,
We can.
yes, we can.
In
Oh,
this
you want
instance,
to send
we
a
are
letter
going
to council. Got it.
So the point is, because we meet so infrequently, what we normally do, the normal process is that staff takes our notes from what we're doing, they prepare a letter, and we, as a committee, normally give the chair the authority to review that letter. If there's time, they can distribute it so that we can provide comments back to the chair. And then once everybody's satisfied with the content, he signs it, sends it to the city council.
Okay.
Okay, when we take the next report to the city council in September, I mean, we can include this discussion, so you don't have to write a letter. We can just write it
That's
into
what,
the agenda
I
report.
assume that's what happened.
They'll say Budget and Finance Commission reviewed this on August 8th. They
And
felt
they
that they
passed
didn't
a
have enough
motion.
information to make a recommendation either way, so therefore they voted to make no changes.
I think it needs to be signed by our chair
To make it more,
to make it formal, and it needs to be summarized, because if you simply include the proceedings, it's going to be 10 pages of proceedings, and they're not going to read it.
I mean, and the letter would be, I think, just as short as what you just said.
One paragraph.
One paragraph. And we could just attach it with the report to send to the city council.
Yeah, I think the letter is a good idea.
Probably all we can do, because I'm pretty uncomfortable with this.
So do you want to make a motion to?
You want a sub-motion to my
Good.
motion?
That's a good-
I think that's what our council does. They do, or they always do something to this.
Or you can just make yours a separate.
Or we can,
I would second it with the modification that it's going to be a
Yes.
letter prepared, and we authorize the chair to sign that letter on behalf of the commission and forward it to the city council.
okay.
And if
you
there's time,
seconded.
I would appreciate it if you could distribute the letter, a draft of the letter, so that everybody can review it and provide comments back to you.
So I don't think I would be able to distribute a draft to everyone, but I could distribute a draft to one person because.
Staff can. We can ask staff to
In the draft,
distribute
every
to
person
everyone if
can
you
do
want to send
Right,
it to staff.
exactly.
And then we send it back to staff. Yeah, we can do that.
Well,
How much time do we have before this goes to the council?
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
September, so the agenda posts the Thursday before the Tuesday meeting in September, but, I mean, we have to look at a
Prepare this, like,
calendar.
Next week. And
Yeah, if we could have the draft by early to mid next week, you can have comments and it'll be ready to go.
Would you like you maybe or Commissioner Castle to write the draft?
Well, no, I mean, we can just take what she put and send it.
Oh, okay.
I'll speak to the city manager's office and he can decide who's going to put them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
think
You want to
that's-
second the motion, I think? You want it?
I second.
All right.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And can we just get a roll call on that as well?
Commissioner Allen,
Yes.
Commissioner Jesty,
Aye.
Commissioner Woodham,
Aye.
Commissioner Samples,
Aye.
Commissioner Sherman,
Yes.
Chair Castle.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin is absent. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the city treasurer's Q4 fiscal year 23-24 report. This evening, we have the assistant treasurer, Nilesh Mehta, taking us through everything.
You turn on our front mic, please?
If we could get his mic turned on. Yeah,
Oh, you turned it off.
You turned it off.
You turned it off.
Oh,
You're good.
Nilesh Mehta, Deputy City Treasurer, here along with Eugene Solomon, City Treasurer. And we have via Zoom, Greg Balls, he's with Meter Investment. He works alongside Rick Phillips, who's out of town currently. Greg, can you hear us on Zoom?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great.
So I will start the presentation and then I'll have Greg continue it afterwards. Laura, can you,
It's the other computer.
it's the back
behind you.
computer?
Yes.
Oh, sorry about that, guys. Let me see. Sorry about that. I was expecting to do it from the front computer.
Nicely organized folders.
Thank you, thank you. Do you know where it is?
I think so. Where's the X?
I don't know. I thought it was on
Oh,
that. No.
no.
Oh, there it is,
here.
there it is. Yeah, I got it. Thank you, thank you. Apologize for the delay. Today we'll be presenting the fourth quarter investment report from the Treasurer's Office. Within the admin report attached to your packet, you'll see the portfolio summary, the investment reporting guidelines, the investment report by Meter Investment, which includes the portfolio summary, investment policy compliance, activity report, and finally, the economic and market update. Within our PowerPoint presentation this evening, we'll have the investment reporting guidelines, policy compliance, the quarterly performance, historical book value, cash flow analysis, month-end portfolio book yield, maturity distribution, trading activity, and finally, the fiscal impact to the city. Key investments for municipal investing, it's very critical to understand this. The city treasurer maintains the city's cash flows while earning a competitive rate of return on the investments within the constraints of the city's investment policy and state law. It's very important to keep in mind safety, which is protecting the principal, liquidity, provide necessary liquidity to cover both ongoing and unexpected cash needs, and finally, yield, which is maximizing earnings recognizing the need for safety and liquidity and subject to restrictions specified by state statutes and local governing body. Investment reporting guidelines per CMTA. Always remember whose money it is. It's the community's, not yours. So we must act accordingly in a responsible stewardship capacity. And investment manager's objective is to earn a reasonable rate of return on the city's investment while preserving capital in the overall portfolio. It should never be the investment manager's goal to earn maximum returns on the city's portfolio, as it would expose the city to an unacceptable level of risk. Failures in public investing occur when policies are not clear, they're inappropriate, they're not followed, or oversight is inadequate. Questions to ask is, do we review the investment policy? Do you understand the program? Do you receive and review periodic investment reports? Are they clear, concise, and readable? Do you fully understand them? And the following slide goes over the policy compliance for the quarter. As you can see in the right-hand column, we show that we are in compliance with the city's investment policies. Here is the quarter-by-quarter performance for the 23-24 fiscal year. Some key points to note: Layfield at the bottom, you'll see 4.33 versus our money market fund, which is earning about 5.1. So you'll see the yield on the benchmark, 3.95, weighted average maturity, 1.39. And I'll go over the categories.
Back to that chart, if you would, just a second. The weighted average maturity, you're obviously pulling down the average rate of maturity. Is that simply reflecting because you're going from a 196 to a 139, is that simply reflect the increased amount in money markets? Is that the only way that has decreased?
So weighted average maturity is calculated based on, that's part of it, which is an increase in the money market. If you could look at the first quarter, we had 8.7 million in money market. And at the end of the fourth quarter, we had about 18 million in the money market. So that's part of the reasons as investments were getting redeemed. We were essentially investing it in shorter term investments.
Part of the other aspect to that is a strategy, and we had some debt service and other AP that we needed to fund. So we were staying a bit shorter in order to accommodate that cash flow need. When we have the opportunity to go out a little bit longer, we have been going into longer maturities, 2 years and 3 years.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Here's a similar comparison for fiscal year 22-23. If you'll look at the Layfield 1 year ago, at the same time, it was 3.17. So the Layfield has increased. The interest earned year to date at that point in time was 2.435% versus 2.77 million. So with a slightly smaller portfolio, we ended up earning a higher interest year to date. And here's a similar comparison going back 21-22 fiscal year. You'll see that the Layfield at that time was 0.86. So Layfield has definitely increased significantly, and it has definitely affected the interest earned year to date. So you'll see 1.3 million. 2 years ago, we were at 1.3 million. So here's the historical book value by fiscal year, and you'll see month-by-month comparison going back to fiscal year 2020. Around the same time, we were at 95 million, and we're currently at almost 103. And then this is a graphical chart of the historical book value going back to 2009, and you'll see the ups and downs of our portfolio. So the following slide is a detailed analysis, a cash flow analysis. We have met the cash flow needs of the city for the quarter and expect to meet the expenditure requirements for the upcoming period. Month-end book yield. So you'll see going back to July 2023, where we were, which is right around 2.6%. And over the course of the fiscal year, we're currently just at 3.22%. And here's a chart for the maturity distribution. We have almost 40% of our investments in investments that are maturing within the 0 to 1 year, and then almost 25% between 1 and 2 year, and so on. Trading activity for the quarter, we purchased 3 investments, and then we redeemed a total of 5. And so that's, if you look at, we have the purchases and redemptions for the entire fiscal year within this chart. Here's a transaction report, which was requested by one of the commissioners. So if you look back on our monthly investment report, it goes over the maturity, the interest earned, and the purchases. And it details the security that was purchased, the yield, and then the expiration, maturity date.
Can you go back
Sure.
to that slide, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. I want to say thank you for putting this. slide.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I saw it and I was very appreciative. So the one purchase that's here, that's line, the fourth from the bottom. So this slide is just for the month of June?
Right. So this is just an example, but we included in each and every one of our investment reports that are published monthly.
Yes, they're there. So what I had asked, I know that it's embedded in the report. And I appreciate that you have it as a slide on your report that you are presenting. So this month we have, just for June, there was one purchase and the fourth one from the bottom. Where are you? Okay, so where's the yield?
That's the, I believe that's the John Deere.
Correct.
It's a John Deere corporate bond at 5.15. So that would be on page 16 of our holdings report.
Okay, so the reason I ask is, so that's the most important part is for the committee, in order for them to ask questions and not just nod our heads and go home. So that information is on the slide, clear to everyone, that they can see one purchase was made and it's a 2-year bond, this type of a bond, whatever name of the bond is, and this is the yield it was purchased. So that if we have questions, we want to ask the strategy why you chose that purchase, or any questions we have, we are able to ask you questions. But putting the yield on the slide would be probably the most important information you have on the slide. Thank you, that's all.
And then the following slide goes over the fiscal year-to-date earnings, going back to fiscal year 2022. As you'll see, we ended this fiscal year at almost 2.8 million, versus going back to 2022, 1.35 million. Interest earned year-to-date, 2.7 million. The general fund contribution rate is 60%, so approximately 1.6 million contributed to the general fund through investment activity. Originally, we had budgeted for a contribution of 1.5 million, so we exceeded that budget contribution amount. Now, the next presentation is going to be with Greg Balls. He's on Zoom. Greg, can you unmute your microphone?
I think I did. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Just let me know when you're ready for me to go.
Okay, go ahead, start.
Okay. So thanks for allowing me to be on the call tonight. I know Rick is a lot more handsome than I am, but he is in air right now. But page 2, moving to page 2, so we have this Figge model, and basically the Figge model is really what drives rates and therefore what drives the investment return for the city. And so the Figge is there below. You have the Fed funds rate, inflation, growth, employment, and then that leads into how the yield curve responds, which is yields. And so with respect to the Fed funds rate, Fed Chair Powell during his presser stated that that September's on the table, basically. And after that statement, the market priced in about 4 to 5 25 basis point cuts by the end of this year, the calendar year. With respect to inflation, it has moderated in the second quarter, and they have stated that they have greater confidence that price pressures are moderating downward. Gross domestic GDP is slated to slow as well, although it's supposed to remain positive. When you look at the employment, it's moderated a little bit. It's increasing, and I don't know if you looked at the recent data, but we had a surprise jump from a 4.1% unemployment rate to about a 4.3%. And that was one of the reasons why we saw rates pushed down as well. And as far as yields are concerned, the longer term rates have peaked, we believe, and we don't expect them to go higher than what we saw in April, and then more specifically October of last year. If you can go to the next page there. Referring to the Fed funds rate, you see that big increase on the left-hand side. And basically, this is what the market thinks where the Fed funds rate is going to be by the end of the year. The table to the right shows you that in September, the market is expecting potentially 2 rate cuts in September, then 1 in November, and then another 2 in December. And that's as of yesterday. Obviously, this is dynamic. It changes quickly. And so if there are positive job numbers that come out, for example, or they see that inflation ticks back up, then we could definitely see the probability of cuts going lower again. Next page. So showing here the 2-year and the Fed funds rate, and basically just showing how the 2-year is somewhat correlated to the Fed funds rate and vice versa. What we've seen in the past is when the 2-year peaks, the Fed funds rate typically has peaked in the past as well. And then as yields go lower, usually yields go lower and then the Fed typically cuts. So it's almost like the market expects the Fed to cut basically, and then the Fed follows suit at a later point in time. Page 5. Now, you were talking about CPI earlier today. Now, how the Fed measures inflation is PCE, which is just a different measurement. And the reason why is because, excuse me, because it more correlates to GDP, and that's why they look at PCE. But as you look at the chart, we peaked at 5.57% early 2022, and it's really come down since that time, and it's moved somewhat sideways over the last 6 months or so. So it's currently at 2.6%. So the Fed's target is 2%, and it hasn't hit that rate yet. Can you go back real quick? I can't. Okay, sorry, it's small on my screen here, but there is a box kind of at the bottom. So the bar chart, those are month over month, whereas the line is a year over year. And the reason why we're pointing that out is because there are some low month over months that are going to be rolling off, in the next couple months. And because of that, because of the base effects, we could see this inflation tick up a little bit. But then as you go into January of 2025, looking at January of 2024, for example, we think that we'll see downward pressure on inflation because of base effects. The next page. Showing the 5-year versus commodities. Typically, there's somewhat of a correlation between yields and commodity prices. And here we see that commodity prices have decreased over the last several months, and the 5-year has gone down as well. Some of the reasons why the commodity prices spiked was, the Russian-Ukraine war was a big issue, and I mean that still persists, but we have seen commodity prices go lower since June of 2022. Next page. All right, so looking at growth, it's interesting to look at this. So first off, the forecast for Q2 of 2024 was for 2% GDP. And so a huge surprise when we saw 2.8%. So what drove that 2.8%? That's what we're showing there in the table. And so one area that was surprising to many was the personal consumption. So basically, this is showing that the consumers were spending the second quarter of 2024. Now, the forecast going forward is for growth to, not be as high, basically. So I think the forecast for Q3 is about 2.1%. And then Q4 is in the 1.5 handle. Next page. We like to look at certain metrics to say, hey, are we going into a recession, or how healthy is the economy? And one metric that's interesting is when you look at trucking and with respect to trucking and employment. So typically, when we see the employment for trucking go lower, that actually has preceded recessions historically. And so that's where you see with the 5 down arrows, and really the 5th arrow is what's happening now. And so trucking employment has gone down, but it still remains elevated versus pre-COVID levels. And so what we'll see if that trend continues lower. You can go to head to the next page. So this is looking at the 3-month yield, the 2-year Treasury, and the 5-year Treasury. And it's important to note what drives each part of the yield curve. And so the top portion there is the Fed funds rate and the 3-month T-bill. Very correlated. What the Fed does really drives what the short-term Treasury does. And you'll note how recently the T-bill has gone lower. And the reason why is because the market is pricing in a Fed cut. And that's basically why. Now, the 2-year and the 5-year is more driven by investors' view as far as long-term growth and as far as their view on where inflation is going to be. And so we have seen yields drop quite a bit April. When you look at the 5-year portion, you'll note the 4.96% yield was on October 19th. In fact, that day, I remember it got to like 4.99 something percent, like it was so close to 5%, but it just never got there. But that's where we think the peak in yields occurred with respect to, the 2-year out to the 30-year. And so we do expect downward pressure going forward on yields. And we do expect that the Fed's going to cut. There is some debate as how quickly they'll be able to do so. Next page. Going back in time, looking at the 2 and 5-year, although yields have come down quite a bit over the last couple of months, they still remain elevated versus where they had been for about 17 years. And so you look at this chart, well, what does it mean? Basically, when you have the opportunity to do so, we are locking in yield when we can, going out there and buying out on the curve and locking in higher yield. I think Eugene pointed out that the city has had some cash needs, and so when we're able to do so, that is what we're looking to do is lock in yields. So that's all I have for you tonight. Any questions?
Treasurer Solomon, you guys added the summaries next to these slides, right? I just saw, so.
The summaries?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, that's new.
yes.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So I just had one question. So on the current duration where we're down to 1.36, we should see that number start to go back up closer to 2.
I think we will. We have several maturities coming this month that we've already had discussions about taking out longer.
Okay.
As you heard Greg mention a minute ago, where we have opportunity to lock in duration, we are going to do that.
Okay.
Do you have any strategy when you guys going to do that?
When that's going to happen?
Yes, like when you're going to start locking in money?
Oh, this month. So the maturities are coming up. I believe there's $7 million
Oh, okay.
coming in this month of maturing off of previous long-term yields that were below 2%. And we had our discussion at our monthly meeting in July about some longer duration, and we'll have a discussion about that at our meeting next week, selecting what those might be.
So Jane, you'll be locking in for what, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years?
Looking more out for 2 years and longer.
2 years.
Yes. It's a smaller percentage of the portfolio. When you're talking about even $7 million, that's, if we were to invest all of that, it would still be less than 7% of our total portfolio. So what we have are some longer-term securities that are not yet coming off the books. And we have some shorter term that we were using for debt service, for AP. We just made our off-cycle, I'll call it off-cycle, CalPERS payment. So we needed some liquidity for that. We needed some liquidity for AP. So that's where we've been a little bit shorter on our duration.
So what's the 1 year yield right now?
1 year T-bill is trading around a little around 5. It's a fluctuating number, as you saw. So on any given day during that auction, we would go out and look to see what would be the best thing to do. At a 2 year, maybe a treasury bill 2 year versus a corporate 2 year. Oftentimes you're able to get a little bit better coupon on a corporate, and that's where we went with the last 2 securities that we purchased. We purchased a John Deere and we purchased Toyota. One was 2 years and one was 3 years.
Don't you have some percentage? You can only go for corporate bonds up to a certain percentage.
We do. There is a cap on the amount of corporate securities that we can own in the portfolio.
Are
Yes.
you at the cap level or?
We're pretty
below?
far below that right now.
Pretty far below, so you can put more money into,
We do have some room to navigate in that space, yes.
no cryptos.
No, that is not something, it's interesting, Commissioner Jesty, that's not something that, there are things that we can invest in based on our investment policy. And we'll have an investment policy discussion here in the next few months. There are also restrictions based on the California Civil Code, so the government code, I should say. So within the government code is a description of those things that we can and cannot do, and that I don't think would fit within those descriptions. It's an interesting conversation, but until the government code changes in that area, it's not something that we'd probably bring back to discuss here.
Good choice.
How much is the Fed going to cut in September?
Say again, sir?
How much is the Fed going to cut rates by in September?
You want my opinion on that? As I look into my crystal ball?
Yeah, I do.
As I shake my magic 8 ball? I would say that I would go by what the street says, and Greg alluded to a minute ago. The street, I think, gives a over 70% chance of 25 basis points. And I think that the 50 basis point cut was checking in around 30%, if I remember that correctly. Might be a little bit higher. So the street's saying 25 points. And you heard Greg said that some people are speculating that might be 4 times before the end of the year. Well, at the beginning of this year, the street was saying there were going to be 7 cuts, and we haven't had one yet.
So Street's been saying there's going to be a cut, then they've been wrong for years now. So don't even bring the street up here. There isn't going to be any cuts in
You
September.
might have
Your
thought
magic
that.
8 ball maybe is accurate.
My magic poll says no cuts in September.
I'm sorry, Greg, you had something?
Oh, no, I was going to say, for whatever it's worth, the Fed and the street and the market, they're both incorrect. But historically, the street has been more correct than the Fed. But that hasn't been the case the last couple of years. So at the beginning of the year, the Fed was saying that there would be 3 cuts by the end of the year. And then they changed it to 1 cut. And then with the data, I mean, they're really data dependent, and they've really signaled what they're going to do. And so I would agree with Eugene. I don't see that the Fed cuts twice in September unless there's some horrible data that comes out. And when I say horrible, I shouldn't say horrible. Rather, if employment data continues to be like the downward pressure, and inflation also goes down quite a bit as much. But I don't know that I see that happening by September.
So Powell's been saying since the beginning of time, his, 2% inflation, that's his target. Are we at 2% inflation now?
No, the last report was just a hair over.
So, I mean, that's the point I'm trying to make. The guy has not been lying to us. He's been saying this for years. 2%,
We got
2%
one
every
bet
meeting.
One bet for 0 cuts and another bet for 1 to 2 cuts.
Yeah.
If you asked me 2 months ago, my statements 2 months ago amongst our discussions with the deputy treasurer and our investment advisory group, Rick and Greg, I was, in that group, I was saying, I don't think there's going to be any cuts. That was my theory on it. With the data that came out, it was 2.03% on the inflation. Jobs came in at 117,000, which was below expectation. And you had a lot of people, and what you saw was the market adjustment the other day. A lot of people speculated those were carry trades, where people were seeing the signaling coming from Chairman Powell that there was going to be or could be a rate cut in September. And so they were taking their carry trades and liquidating those because they were seeing a reduction in what rates were going to be. So they were freeing up cash, getting out of their positions and getting ready to get into a new position.
Last year, this time, I wrote a report, and it's a public record, that there will not be any cuts or raises in 2024 until maybe the last couple of months of 2024. So far, my magic ball is good. So it's in writing, it's a public record, that's what I predicted, and everybody was saying something else at the time. And it's like,
Just
no.
4 days, the situation has changed dramatically between Monday and Thursday, so you can.
I agree, Commissioner Jesty, and earlier this week, you had people out there calling for an emergency rate cut, and now they've backed off of that. So this is why you don't try and predict the market. This is why you come up with your strategy. You adjust your strategy based upon data, and that's our theory. That's
And
how
you
we
diversify and be ready for any, so that your money is ready for any situation, and diversification, like, you have some, nice amount of liquid in case you need to.
the liquidity, safety, and
Yep.
yield. The mantra.
Corporate bonds, do they have as much liquidity as the Fed?
I would say if you're talking about resale on the secondary market, so if you had to get out of a security early, you probably have more flexibility with treasuries in the secondary market than you do with than you do with corporates. But the corporates, that's why the corporates are providing a little bit better yield. And so that makes it more attractive in the secondary market, especially if you're seeing rate cuts, if you're seeing a reduction in rates. And so if you're sitting at a coupon at 5% and somebody's going out there and seeing treasuries at 2%, they can go out and try and find a treasury at 2% and try that swap, do their analysis, or they could try and get a corporate and do that analysis. Both of them have a secondary market. I think treasury secondary market's a little bit more fluid, a little bit more liquid than corporates. But when you're selling out of a position that everybody wants, you're going to have a lot more attraction to it.
So
We're not going to do that.
When you chose John Deere, you looked at the flexibility and how much easier it will be to dispose it of if you have to.
That's not part of a real priority for us. We're not thinking about selling securities before maturity. We have other requirements. Certainly, as far as the quality of the paper, it has to be A paper. We look at several different corporates, so we look at the company itself. I think when you're buying certain types of paper and certain types of companies, and with that comes the ability to trade it in the secondary market should we have need of an emergency liquidation.
And if I could mention just one thing, oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say that the real strategy for him is to buy and hold for our policy. So the concern to sell is secondary.
It's not a priority. Go ahead, Greg.
In worst case, I was just going to say, worst case scenario, let's say, oh my goodness, we do need to sell something. There are so many different options before we have to sell a corporate, like, let's say worst case scenario, John Deere, which we're very comfortable with that name, by the way. Let's say John Deere, all of a sudden the yields jump up on John Deere and we'd have to sell that at a loss. Well, we have so many different options to choose from. So corporates only make up about 8% right now of their overall portfolio. And so, treasuries and agencies, which are the most liquid securities, they represent combined about 75%. So we are more, it's a buy and hold strategy as well. So we always say it's easier to predict your cash flow than it is the market. And I think you've done a really good job at that.
Agreed.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.
Okay.
Thank you,
Have a
Greg.
good night.
Move to receive and file?
Yes, can we get a roll call vote? First have a motion to receive and file?
Motion
Do you
to
want to
receive
take
and
public
file?
comments, sir?
Oh, sorry. Like take public comments? Are there any?
There are no e-comments and no attendees at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion to receive and file?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, could we do a roll call vote, please?
Okay, Commissioner Allen,
Aye.
Commissioner Justy,
Aye.
Commissioner Woodhan,
Aye.
Commissioner Samples, Commissioner Shervin,
Yes.
Chair Castle,
Yes.
Commissioner Marin, absent. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the fiscal year 23-24 Q4 financial reporting from July of 2023 to June of 2024. And we have our Assistant Finance Director.
All right, good evening, council members. On to your third item for the night. This is going to be, let's see, can I scroll this? There we go. This will be your final report like this that you're going to look at for fiscal year 23-24. However, it will not be your final look at fiscal year 23-24 numbers, and I'd like to frame this presentation for you in that way. We will be coming to you with our final 23-24 numbers before our carryover report, which will be in October. What we normally do when we bring you these numbers is we look at where we are to date and we compare it to the prior year at the same time. This doesn't work particularly well for the end of the fiscal year because we have not received all of our revenues at this time. So there's a reason why during kind of July, August, we're going through fiscal year end close. We're capturing all the final expenditures haven't come in, final revenues that haven't come in. So we're giving you kind of a preliminary view of our revenues and expenditures. For the expenditures, these final numbers are going to be closer than for the revenues, just because some of our revenues lag a few months. So just want to provide that framing as we look through the numbers. I'm sure if you took a look through, you'll notice that we are below 100% on our revenues, which is not where we want to be. Just from our analysis, we do think that we are going to meet and maybe slightly exceed our revenue. So we just wanted to provide that framing for you. Same thing I'm saying again, multiple times. Again, just some of our revenue items lag the fiscal year closing date. Also during these time, we are doing our fiscal year transactions. So we make some journal entries, we accrue revenues and expenditures. Again, all this is part of our normal year-end close process. We're just kind of in the middle of it at this point. However, we didn't want to skip a time to give this commission the information they're used to receiving. So I just included the numbers here. Again, you can see the revenue of all other funds, for example, is showing around 83%. This largely, again, reflects timing and kind of our year-end procedures. So as we usually do, we like to go into a little bit more detail in our revenue sources. Oh, you know what? I think this is the wrong presentation.
Was this the earlier version?
It is. Sorry, I think Nilesh pulled this up, so if you give me I don't want to blame Nilesh. I will pull this up. If you give me 1 second. So the numbers are about 98% the same. Just want to make sure. Oops. got to the wrong point here. Let's see. I do think this is still the wrong presentation. You know what?
Can you
If you
access
give
your
me
email?
one, I'm sorry?
Can you access your email?
Yes, if you give me 1 second, I can just pull it up.
So just go to your sent items, the stuff that you sent us.
I don't think I. Can you access the blue folder item? Can you bring up the blue folder item for me for item J3? Can we put that on a screen? Let me see if I can pull it up here. You know what, I'll just keep going through. Again, the numbers are the same. I think it's fine, and you have your blue folder item that you can refer to. I don't want to slow down the commission. So I'll just talk you through these numbers. Again, so what my statement here is the tax revenue receipts are close to prior year and budget. This is true. In addition, we do expect to meet our budget. And I'll talk you through some of these numbers. As you can see, there's a little more red on here than I think reflects reality. The top line number I would like to point out, though, is that our property tax is both ahead of what we brought in prior year and ahead of our budget. As you are aware, this is our largest single tax source and our most important revenue source for the general fund. So that is great news for the city. You'll also remember we increased the budget for this at mid-year. So we're bringing in more revenue than anticipated even after increasing the budget, which is great. For the transient occupants, for the remaining 3 items on the slide, our TOT, franchise fees, UUT, and sales tax, we expect additional revenue. So for example, the TOT here is not including our last 2 months that we expect to receive. Same for franchise fees. UUT, we do expect to get some additional revenue. We may end up a little bit below budget on our UUT. We've spoken to our consultant about this, and that's pretty standard for what they're seeing in California and especially in Southern California. But so that's one item where we may actually end up a little bit below budget. In sales tax, we anticipate the majority of 1/4 of additional payment to come in. So again, while these numbers are below budget at this point, just based on what we've seen and what we know is coming in, we believe we'll reach budget. Non-tax revenue is on track to meet or exceed budget. Charges for service in particular, and this is one number that I changed in our final presentation. So you'll notice this 3.7 million. This actually just reflects that we have not completed all of our final internal services journals. Apart from our overhead, which falls in this category and which represents kind of a large number in this category, we are actually $1.2 million or 5% ahead of budget, which is great news for the city. And it also means that, that's 100% external revenue. It's revenue we were not expecting because it's ahead of budget. This is also an area where council just increased some of our fees. So I think the fact that we're coming in ahead of budget shows this kind of an area where the city can get more revenue, and increasing our fees is a good sign for that for the future. License and permits, again, we are very slightly below budget, but we've collected about 99% of our revenue. I do not think that's an issue. So again, this is just your total table showing the same thing that we've discussed in the prior slides. I'll point out too that even with a lot of additional revenue that we expect to bring in and accrue, we're at 95% for the general fund. And again, we do anticipate receiving more revenue in these areas. I'll just point out, since our city treasurer is still here, he is propping up the all other revenues line item, bringing in your investment returns. So that's where that category would fall, is in the all other revenues in this slide. I'll just point out for that line item as well, a large portion of that is where we budget for a reimbursement from our other post-employment benefits CERBIT trust. So again, this is a guaranteed reimbursement. We just don't usually get it until mid-August. In all other funds, again, the vast majority of these, the revenues are not, we wouldn't receive them regularly. So these largely reflect reimbursements, transfers, and entries that we'll make periodically. So again, these are not representative of what our final numbers will be. The one exception to that are enterprise funds. They show up kind of in the middle there. Those are our funds that operate somewhat as a business. So this includes our transit fund, harbor uplands, harbor tidelands, our sewer, and our wastewater. So these are showing at 92%. I looked more closely into those funds specifically. Our transit fund, that amount below the 100% reflects a transfer that we make at the end of the year from one of our other funds. And then our harbor tidelands and harbor uplands funds, the tidelands actually has brought in more revenue than budgeted so far, and our uplands fund is close. And those, again, are funds where some of the primary revenue sources, which are lease revenues, lag. So we're still waiting, I believe, for May and June for those items. So again, while you're not seeing revenue as close to the budget as I think, and or over the budget as we would like, at this point, it's really important to remember that this is not reflective of all the revenue we'll receive. While if you look at 22, 23, that's reflective of our final actual numbers. And as, again, as usual, we just show current year compared to prior year. This slide, again, is not very relevant for this point in the year. I may switch up the format if we report to you again at the same period. We're just showing the same. So if you're looking, for example, at our charges for services or at our tax revenues, this is comparing final receipts to what we've received as of today. And this is the same thing for all of our funds. So moving on to spending. Our total city spending is below budget. Many of these savings do reflect unspent capital funds, which will carry over. And again, this is something that you'll see in when we bring the year-end report. So we'll show carryover numbers. We do have less than expected spending in all of our non-personnel expense line items. Compared to last year, our spending is in line with regular operations. Nothing is standing out. General fund spending is slightly ahead of prior year, and other funds are ahead of prior year, and this increase is largely in our enterprise and internal service funds. This is related to capital and to the change that we made to our internal services calculation this year. It's a little bit more focused on the general fund. The only thing that really stands out, and we can look at in this next slide here, personnel spending is a little bit higher. So you'll see we're at 98% in personnel and 100% in fringe. Again, slightly ahead of last year. This reflects the MOU increases that went through last year. If you remember, we started seeing a little bit of increases in those two line items even in our third quarter. So again, that's pretty expected. For the expenditure numbers, these are probably closer to final just because, they happen as they happen. We'll have a few late expenses that come in that we may record back here. And again, we'll do our carryover. But these are much closer to final. So I think we can pretty confidently, expect some savings here. And I would just say, even though we're comparing, current to date to actuals, with all of the personnel changes that we had this year, the percentage change from year to year, I think is not huge considering everything that we've gone through in this year. And then for the other funds, kind of similarly, the percent spent is a little difficult to gauge just because of the types of spending we do here. The low percentage really reflects that a large amount of this spending is capital. So we're definitely not going to spend 100% of that in the year. We'll carry it over.
Stephanie?
Yes.
On the expenditures, capital improvement funds,
Yes.
your budget was 13.3 and you only spent 3.6?
So the capital improvement fund, this is one fund where we have capital spending. So capital spending is spread throughout our funds. So if you'll see, even in our general fund, in the category up there, the capital outlay, that actually includes some capital expenditures as well. The capital improvement funds, those are 3 funds that are sort of like our general purpose capital spending. So that is one portion of our capital budget.
So the difference has to do with timing of various capital projects.
It does, and also it reflects that we are not going to spend, nor do we plan to spend 100% of that 13.3 million in 1 year. So
But it is so much less than 13.3, you're showing in the 23-24 fiscal year. The budget was 13.3 and actual was 3.6.
yes.
And last year, 22-23, the budget was 14.6 and the actual was 3.6. So why are we allocating so much funds if you're not spending more than 25%?
So this is the way that we do our capital budgeting. We allocate a whole amount to a project. As you remember, we have a 5-year capital plan. So we'll budget the whole amount of the project. We go through the year, we are able to spend, however much, based on however much of the project we're able to complete. And then we carry over unspent funds to continue that.
So you're saying the 13.3 is for a multi-year.
Yes, it reflects it. Yes. So we do not plan to spend, when we start out with that $13.3 million budget, we do not plan to spend $13.3 million in a year. So it's not that we plan to spend that every year and we're failing. We budget that because that money, those funds are set aside for those projects. And then at the end of the year, again, you'll see with our carryover process, we'll carry over unspent the capital funds that we still want to dedicate to those projects into the next year.
So that goes back to our discussion last month when I said we don't know by project, specific project, how much was the original budget and what you ended up spending when the project was completed.
So I have a plan for these quarterly reports in our next kind of upcoming fiscal year that I'd like to start with our first quarter. I'm going to talk to Jesse, our capital projects manager, who spoke to you at our last meeting, about a way to separate out our capital spending here and provide a report that shows the spending by project. I think would make this reporting a lot more clear as well, because again, you can see the capital's large numbers and it can distort, overall spending and make it a little bit more difficult to see operationally what the city's doing. So I think that could be helpful in both areas.
Exactly. The 13.3 is misleading because it's not the amount you need in the current or the previous fiscal year. You're not going to spend that much, you're going to spend only 25%. So if the budget is for the year, then you should only show what you're spending during that year, not going out beyond that. And maybe you have another column that says, okay, these projects will cost $15 million, but this year we're going to spend only that much, so that's what's in the budget.
And I believe we reflect that in the 5-year capital plan, which we present with the budget. But we will, again, we have some plans to add a little bit more kind of detail and granularity on the capital that I'm looking forward to sharing with the commission.
Thank you.
Stephanie? I was able to add the blue folder.
Yay,
Hopefully it's a shared folder and you're able to access it.
okay.
You want to double check?
Yeah, let me go for that. Is there a refresh button?
Just hit highlight and hit enter.
I don't see it.
Oh, I added it under, oh, you know what? Give me 1 second.
Okay. I'll still pull this up for a minute because we're almost through, and then I can go back and show you just a couple things that I was going to explain. So again, this is our general fund expenditure rate by category. Again, this is current year to date versus prior year final. Again, this is a little more useful of a comparison on the expenditure side because I think it's will, roughly be close to this amount. And just the same amount, the same comparisons in our different funds, across our different funds. Those are all the numbers that I had for you. Our next steps, as I mentioned, is the fiscal year 23-24 year-end carryover report. This will be an almost final look at the numbers. Of course, they won't be audited at that point, so we usually end up with some minor adjustments, but this is what we'll bring to you to review before council sees it. Yeah, go ahead.
So I just have one quick
Sure.
question. The new service revenue based on the higher service increases that the
Yes.
city council passed, that started in this new fiscal year. It's not reflected in any of these numbers, correct?
It actually is, the internal services. Yes, so that would be reflected, where's our revenue? So that number is reflected in this 22.5 million for charges for service. So if you'll notice, this is down at 18.8. That's because we haven't made our final payment on that. Is that what you're asking?
So I guess all of the new increases for all of the services that the city council
Oh,
passed?
I'm sorry, the fees. No, that would be for next fiscal year.
Right, okay, that's what I was asking,
Yes.
sorry.
Those were loaded up. Those were added in beginning on July, was it July 1?
Ended up being July 10th, but yes.
July 10.
Okay.
So you have to have those fees, for example, dog licensing fees, or as an example, or parking permits is a better example. Some of those are going to be seasoned in over the course of the next fiscal year.
Okay.
Exactly. So I think my point that I slightly, probably inelegantly made about our charges for service is that this is already an area where we're bringing in more than budget. And when these increases take effect next year, this could potentially bring in additional revenue for us.
And then one other question I had, just because you mentioned that these are obviously the unaudited numbers for the year. Has the new auditor started working and reviewing all of the numbers, and how's that going so far internally?
They have started, they've begun their initial information gathering and asked a bunch of questions of staff. It's going well so far. They're a little bit more on the ground level still because they're new. They're still gathering some of our information and have done some initial testing. They don't tend to look at kind of the budget to actuals till a little bit later in the process, so they haven't looked at these numbers specifically, but they are well into we're well into the audit.
Process, okay.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
I'll see if I can show you, I'll see, I guess, I don't know if there's anything else to show you if you don't have questions. I would just encourage you, if you're sitting at home and you want to look at this again, please look at my revised version. I think it's a little bit cleaner and gives you kind of a better idea of where we think this will be going. Yeah, I think that's about it. I was going to make one more comment about carryover, and maybe this is something to discuss next meeting. Chair Castle and I discussed this briefly. We are aiming to take our carryover report to council on October 15th. This commission's regularly scheduled meeting is on the Thursday before that, which would not give you a whole lot of time to review, and being mindful of that. I just wanted to bring up those dates, and I think according to the city clerk's representative can correct me if I'm wrong, but the commissions can reconsider meeting dates only on the date prior to the meeting date that they're going to change. I believe that's correct.
So for this meeting, we can consider changing the next meeting date, but not.
But not several meetings from now.
Right, but not several meetings ahead or 2 days ahead. So that I guess any changes would be officially on the record.
So I guess I would just bring it up for our reference, maybe to discuss in September whether we'd like to move or could move our October meeting maybe up a week, or if it's preferable to the team here, I guess we could move the September meeting kind of, 3 weeks forward, but just to get your thoughts on that as we lead up to it and try and give the commission enough time to review.
As always, subject to availability for the
Exactly,
council
yes.
chambers.
Yes, thank you.
So I'm sorry, say that last part one more time. So we could get the information in September.
Yes, you could.
And get it to the council, but if we needed to come back and revisit it, we'd have to schedule a special meeting in September.
Well, so your September meeting is the second week of September. We would not have this information by your September meeting.
Okay.
What I'm saying is for the October meeting, we could think about moving that forward. So again, subject to, council chamber availability, have that the first week in October, for example, instead of the second week.
I'm available October 3rd, Thursday.
On that first Thursday? I mean, I would,
Do you want to look at your calendars and
Well,
let them know?
again, we don't need to do this now because I think we can't make the decision at this point anyway, but if the commission wanted to think about, look at your calendars and think about what would be available for you kind of in that first week of October, last week of September, we can think about that. So
and we would have to set that date at the next meeting.
At the September
Because
meeting.
we have to do it at the meeting prior to the actual change meeting.
I just made a note in my calendar so that I don't do anything else other than meetings.
Okay. All right. If there are no other questions, do I have a motion to receive and file?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
And if we could have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Allen,
Aye.
Commissioner Justy,
Aye.
Commissioner Woodham,
Aye.
Commissioner Samples,
Aye.
Commissioner Sherbin,
Aye.
Chair Castle,
Aye. Thank you.
Commissioner Marin absent.
Sorry. Thank you. And were there any public comments, even though?
There are no e-comments and no attendees at this time.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda are member items and referrals to staff. I just want to follow up on that statement that they did change the rules about, Mayor Light, about the committees and how we meet. Because I guess in other committees, people were absent frequently and not calling ahead. So if you're going to be absent, if you could call and let us know ahead of time, that would be great. And then in terms of us moving meetings, they changed it, and now it's a formal policy that we can only change the meeting date at the meeting prior to that meeting.
got it. Okay.
Because what happened, I guess what was happening is that some commissions weren't meeting and the city would be prepared and here in chambers and no one would show up. So we haven't really run into that here, but if you're going to be absent, just let us know as soon as
Yeah,
possible.
just to chime in on that, it's best practice to email the city clerk to let her know of any absence.
Okay,
Yeah, thank you.
thank you. Do we have any other member items or referrals to staff?
I was going to say something about CalPERS, but Stephanie says that September meeting, we're going to be discussing CalPERS, so I'm looking forward to that.
Anything else? Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Right, second. All right, we are adjourned.